The thunder rolled across Manhattan like a warning, rattling the floor-to-ceiling windows of Alexander Chen's penthouse. At 33, he'd built an empire in commercial real estate that most men twice his age could only dream of. His world was one of steel and glass, contracts and conquests. No room for softness, no time for sentiment. Tonight, he'd returned home late from Tokyo, exhausted and irritable. The last thing he expected was to find his normally pristine living room in disarray, with cushions scattered and what appeared to be crayon marks on his imported Italian coffee table. Sophia. His voice cut through the apartment like a blade. Sophia Martinez appeared in the doorway, her dark eyes wide with concern. At 28, she'd worked for Mr. Chen for 3 months, the longest she'd managed to keep any job since her daughter was born. She was petite, with hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing the simple gray uniform he required. "Mr. Chen, I'm so sorry. I'll clean it immediately." "Where is she?" Alexander's jaw tightened. He'd made it clear when he hired Sophia that her daughter was never to be here during his work hours. Never. "Sir, please, I had no choice. The daycare called. There's a flu outbreak. They sent everyone home. My neighbor who usually helps, she's out of town, and I couldn't. Your problems are not my concern." Alexander loosened his tie, feeling the familiar walls of control closing in around him. "I have the Morrison deal presentation at 6 a.m. I need silence. I need order. I don't need." That's when he heard it. The softest whimper coming from behind the velvet curtains near the window seat. His eyes narrowed. "Is she behind there?" Sophia's face went pale. "Emma, sweetheart, it's okay. Come out now." But there was only silence, followed by another crack of thunder that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely, plunging the penthouse into darkness. "The backup generator should," Alexander began, but then he heard it. A tiny, terrified voice, barely above a whisper. "Please hide me in your blanket." Something in that small, trembling voice stopped Alexander cold. In the darkness, he could hear Sophia moving toward the curtains, murmuring soft reassurances in Spanish. "Emma, mi amor, come to mama." "No, Scary, the sky is angry." The child's voice broke into sobs. Alexander stood frozen, his briefcase still in his hand, his mind racing through logistics, the presentation, his need for sleep, the principle of boundaries he'd established. But another sound emerged from behind those curtains, a kind of hitching, gasping breath that he recognized from somewhere deep in his own forgotten childhood. A panic attack. The child was having a panic attack. "The blanket," Sophia whispered urgently, more to herself than to him. "Her security blanket is at home. I forgot it in the rush." Before his rational mind could intervene, Alexander found himself moving. He set down his briefcase, crossed to the window seat, and gently pulled back the curtain. In the dim emergency lighting that had finally kicked on, he saw her. A tiny girl, no more than 3 years old, curled into the smallest ball possible, her whole body shaking. Her dark curls were plastered to her tear-stained face, and her brown eyes, so much like her mother's, were wide with terror. "Emma." Sophia reached for her daughter, but the child seemed locked in her fear, unable to move. Alexander did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He thought of his younger sister, Lily, who'd been terrified of storms before the accident. Before everything changed. Slowly, he shrugged off his suit jacket, custom-made, worth more than Sophia's monthly salary. Without thinking, without calculating, he knelt down beside the trembling child. "Hey there," he said softly, surprised by the gentleness in his own voice. "You're right. The sky does sound angry tonight." Emma's eyes focused on him, still afraid, but curiosity flickering through the terror. "But I'll tell you a secret," Alexander continued, doing something that felt both foreign and strangely natural. He wrapped his jacket around her small shoulders like a blanket. "Skies are like people. Sometimes they're loud because they have big feelings. But the loud part doesn't last forever." Sophia watched in stunned silence as her normally austere employer sat cross-legged on his expensive hardwood floor, speaking in a tone she'd never heard him use. "See this jacket?" Alexander adjusted it around Emma's shoulders. "It's pretty good at keeping scary things out. My sister used to say that anything wrapped in something soft and safe couldn't be touched by bad dreams or scary sounds." "Your sister?" Emma whispered, her breathing starting to slow. Alexander felt something crack inside his chest, like ice that had been frozen for too long.
"Yes."
"She was brave, like you're going to be." "I'm not brave," Emma said, but she'd stopped shaking quite so violently. "Sure you are. You know how I can tell." Alexander found himself smiling, actually smiling for the first time in months. Brave people are still scared. They just decide that whatever they need to do is more important than the scary feeling. "What do I need to do?" Emma asked, her tiny fingers clutching the jacket. "Well, your mom looks pretty worried over there. I think she needs to know you're okay." "Think you can do that?" Emma looked at Sophia, then back at Alexander. Slowly, she nodded. "Okay then. On the count of 3, we're going to be brave together. 1, 2, 3. On 3, Emma launched herself towards Sophia, who caught her daughter and held her tight, tears streaming down her face. But she kept Alexander's jacket wrapped around her shoulders like armor against the storm. Alexander stood, feeling oddly exposed without his jacket, watching mother and daughter cling to each other. The Morrison presentation suddenly seemed very far away, very unimportant. "Sir, Sophia looked up at him, her face a mixture of gratitude and confusion. "Thank you. I'll have your jacket cleaned and keep it for tonight," Alexander heard himself say. "Let her keep it until the storm passes." As another roll of thunder shook the windows, Emma didn't scream. She just held her mother tighter and pulled the jacket closer, and Alexander Chin realized that something fundamental had just shifted in his carefully controlled world. He just didn't know yet how much. Alexander woke at 4:47 a.m., 3 minutes before his alarm, as he always did. For a moment, he lay in the darkness of his bedroom, disoriented by the memory of the previous night. Had he really knelt on his living room floor, comforting a child with his Brioni jacket? The Morrison presentation. He sat up abruptly, reaching for his phone. 43 emails already, 3 from investors in Asia, 2 from his CFO. The machine of his empire never stopped turning, never allowed for distractions, never. A small sound from the hallway made him pause. Soft voices, one soothing, one tiny and uncertain. He should be in the shower. He should be reviewing the financial projections. Instead, Alexander found himself pulling on a t-shirt and moving quietly to his bedroom door. Through the crack, he could see into the guest room he'd offered Sophia last night, another unprecedented decision that had seemed to make itself. Sophia was braiding Emma's hair, speaking in that gentle mix of English and Spanish he'd heard her use on the phone sometimes. "Remember, Pequeña, Mr. Chun is a very busy, very important man. We must be quiet as little mice today, yes? And tonight, we go back to our apartment." "But Mama..." Emma's voice was clearer this morning, less frightened. "He was nice. He gave me his blanket when I was scared." "I know, baby. But that doesn't mean it was a special circumstance. Mr. Chin has a big meeting today. We cannot bother him." Alexander watched as Sophia tied off the braid with a small elastic, then kissed the top of her daughter's head. There was something in the gesture, the complete devotion, the fierce protectiveness that made his chest tighten. His own mother had never braided his hair, of course, but she'd once buttoned his coat with that same careful attention before his first day of kindergarten. Before the divorce, before his father's remarriage, before Lily came along and then left just as quickly. He pushed the memory away and checked his watch. 5:03 a.m. He needed to move. The shower was scalding, the way he liked it, washing away sentiment and leaving only purpose. By 5:27, he was dressed in a fresh suit, navy this time, with a red tie that his image consultant had said projected confidence, without aggression. At 5:31, he was in his home office, scrolling through the presentation deck one final time. The Morrison Group wanted to sell their entire portfolio of properties in the tri-state area. 12 buildings, prime locations, worth just over $340 million. If Alexander could secure this deal at his target price, Chin Capital would become the third largest commercial real estate holder in New York. It would be the victory that defined this chapter of his career. Mr. Chin? He looked up to find Sophia in the doorway, Emma's hand clasped in hers. His jacket, the one he'd wrapped around the child last night, was folded neatly over Sophia's arm. "I've cleaned it as best I could here," Sophia said, not quite meeting his eyes. "I'll take it to your usual cleaner tomorrow if—" "It's fine." Alexander stood, reaching for the jacket. As he took it, his fingers brushed Sophia's, and he noticed how cold her hands were. How had he never noticed before that the apartment might be too cold for a child? Emma was staring at him with those impossibly large eyes, and he realized she was wearing the same clothes as yesterday. Of course, Sophia hadn't planned for an overnight stay. She probably had nothing here except what was in her daughter's emergency backpack. "Emma wanted to thank you," Sophia prompted gently. The little girl stepped forward, solemn as a judge. "Thank you for the blanket, Mr. Chin. It helped me be brave." Something about the formality of it, this tiny person thanking him as if he'd done something heroic instead of simply being human for 5 minutes, made Alexander uncomfortable. "You're welcome," he said, his voice stiff even to his own ears. An awkward silence fell. Sophia shifted her weight, clearly preparing to usher Emma away and disappear into the background of his life, where she belonged, where his employees belonged. But then Emma said, in that unfiltered way that children have, "You look sad." "Emma?" Sophia's face flushed with embarrassment. "That's not polite." "It's fine," Alexander interrupted, though he felt exposed, as if this child could see through the armor of his suits and success. "I'm not sad. I'm focused. I have an important meeting." "Oh." Emma considered this. "Mama gets focused too, before her night school classes." She makes that same face. Alexander's eyes flicked to Sophia. "Night school?" Sophia's flush deepened. "It's nothing, sir. I'm working toward my accounting degree. Online courses, mostly, after Emma's asleep." "It's not. It doesn't interfere with my work here, I promise." "I didn't ask if it interfered." Alexander found himself curious despite his better judgment. "How long have you been working on the degree?" 6 years, sir. Part-time, when I can afford the courses." Sophia's chin lifted slightly, and Alexander saw a flash of pride beneath the deference. "I have 2 semesters left." 6 years. While raising a child alone, working full-time, managing in a country where, he realized, English probably wasn't her first language. Alexander did mental math, without thinking, a habit from years of deal-making. If she'd been at it for 6 years part-time, she was probably managing 1, maybe 2 courses per semester. At that rate, and with the cost of online degree programs. "Sir?" Sophia's voice pulled him back. "We should let you prepare." "Come, Emma." But Alexander was still calculating, still seeing the determined set of Sophia's shoulders, still hearing Emma's small voice saying, "You look sad." "What time does Emma's daycare open?" he asked. Sophia blinked. 7 o'clock, but they're still closed today because of the flu outbreak. I've called in to the backup emergency childcare service, but they can't take her until 9, so I was hoping. Take her to Brightside Academy, Alexander said, the words coming out before he'd fully thought them through. On 63rd and Madison. Tell them you're with Chin Capital. They'll take her. Sir, I couldn't possibly afford. I'm not asking you to afford it. Alexander checked his watch again. 5:47 a.m. Consider it a company benefit. Reliable childcare means reliable employees. He could see Sophia struggling with her pride, with gratitude, with confusion. He understood. He'd just confused himself. I thank you, Mr. Chen. I'll repay you. No need. He turned back to his computer, signaling the end of the conversation. I need to finish preparing. Yes, sir. Of course. Come, Emma. But as they reached the door, Alexander found himself speaking again. Sophia? She turned, and in the early morning light streaming through the windows, he noticed things he'd never paid attention to before. The shadows under her eyes. The careful way she'd mended a small tear in her uniform. The cheap watch on her wrist that she checked constantly, always aware of time, always calculating her minutes. Sir, your work is... He paused, uncertain what he was trying to say. Adequate. Better than adequate. You keep this place running smoothly. It was perhaps the most awkward compliment he'd ever given, but Sophia's face transformed. Her smile was like sunrise, warm and genuine and completely unguarded. Thank you, sir. That means more than you know. After they left, Alexander sat in his office, staring at the presentation deck without seeing it. The numbers blurred together. 340 million. 6 years of night school. A 3-year-old who thought his focused face looked sad. His phone buzzed. His driver confirming pickup at 6:15 a.m. Alexander Chin, who prided himself on focus, on singular determination, found his mind wandering to a child wrapped in his jacket, finding courage in borrowed fabric. Found himself thinking about a woman who'd been working for him for 3 months, and how he'd never once asked her anything about her life beyond whether the floors were clean and the dry cleaning was collected. At 6:14, he stood in his foyer, briefcase in hand, game face on. Today would define the next chapter of his empire. But as he rode the elevator down to the lobby, he couldn't stop thinking about the previous chapter. The one that had ended when he was 18, when he decided that caring about people only led to loss, that the only safe thing to build was money and power and walls high enough to keep everything else out. The Morrison deal was worth $340 million. But what was the price of all the things he'd locked outside those walls? The elevator doors opened. Alexander Chin stepped out into his world of conquest and control. But something small and stubborn in his chest whispered that maybe, just maybe, he'd left something valuable behind in that penthouse, wrapped in expensive fabric and slowly learning to be brave. The Morrison presentation went flawlessly. By 9:47 a.m., Alexander had them exactly where he wanted them. Leaning forward, hungry, seeing him as not just a buyer but a partner in their legacy. By 11:30, they'd agreed to his terms pending final due diligence. By noon, he should have been celebrating with his team at their usual spot, a steakhouse where they'd toasted every major victory for the past 5 years. Instead, at 12:03 p.m., Alexander found himself standing outside Brightside Academy, watching through the window as Emma played in a sunny room full of children and educational toys he couldn't have named. He told himself he was just checking that his recommendation had been sound, that the facility met his standards. He told himself it was about due diligence, about ensuring his employees had access to quality resources. He didn't examine why he'd left his CFO and legal team celebrating without him, or why he'd directed his driver here instead of to the restaurant. Mr. Chen, the academy director, a woman named Patricia Monroe, approached with a warm smile. We don't usually get visits from our corporate sponsors. Is everything all right? I wanted to ensure the facility was suitable. Of course. Patricia's eyes twinkled with something that looked suspiciously like amusement. Would you like a tour? He should say no. He should return to the office, finalize the Morrison paperwork, move forward with the momentum of victory. Instead, he found himself nodding. Patricia led him through rooms filled with organized chaos, children building block towers, painting with fierce concentration, listening to a teacher read a story about a brave little mouse. It was a world he'd never inhabited, even as a child. His own early education had been private tutors and rigid structure, preparing him for the heir he was supposed to become before his father's second family made him redundant. That's Emma, Patricia said softly, pointing to where the little girl was carefully arranging toy animals in a line. Sophia called me herself this morning, so nervous, so apologetic about the short notice. She's a lovely woman. Yes, Alexander said, though he realized he knew almost nothing about Sophia beyond her efficiency and the shadows under her eyes. Emma told me about the storm last night, Patricia continued, about how you helped her feel safe. Alexander shifted uncomfortably. It was nothing. To you, perhaps. To a frightened child. To a single mother trying to do everything right. Patricia's gentle smile held a knowing edge. Those small moments are everything, Mr. Chen. Through the window, Alexander watched Emma hand a toy elephant to another child who'd been reaching for it. Such a simple gesture of sharing, but something in it made his throat tight. If you'll excuse me, Patricia said, I should help with lunch preparations. You're welcome to stay as long as you like. Left alone, Alexander stood at the window, this man who commanded boardrooms and built empires, watching a 3-year-old girl who'd called him sad and thanked him for a blanket. His phone buzzed. His assistant. Morrison, people ecstatic. Legal says we can close in 2 weeks. Congratulations, sir. 2 weeks to a $340 million deal. It should feel like triumph. Why did it feel hollow? At 12:47, he made a decision that would have baffled his younger self. He called his assistant back. Clear my afternoon. Sir, you have the investor call at 2. Reschedule everything. Something's come up. By 1:15, he was back at his penthouse, where Sophia was polishing silver in the dining room, silver he never used, from formal dinner parties he never hosted. Mr. Chen. She nearly dropped the serving platter. I wasn't expecting you home until. Is everything all right?
Fine.
The Morrison deal went well. He loosened his tie, feeling the familiar constraints of his life settling back around him. I need to ask you something. Sophia set down the silver, her hands twisting nervously in her polishing cloth. Of course, sir. Why did you take this job? She blinked. Sir, you're studying accounting. You're clearly intelligent, capable. You could be working in an office, getting relevant experience for your degree. Why clean my apartment? A flash of something hurt? Pride crossed Sophia's face. Because I have a 3-year-old daughter, Mr. Chen. Office jobs don't offer the flexibility I need. They don't let me bring my child when daycare's close. They don't pay as well as you do for the hours I can work. What about Emma's father? Gone. The word was flat, final. He left when I was 6 months pregnant. Decided fatherhood wasn't part of his life plan. Alexander flinched at the bitterness in her voice. Earned bitterness, he realized. I came to this country at 23, Sophia continued, and now that she'd started, the words seemed to pour out. I had a work visa, a job offer at a hotel. I was going to save money, build a career, maybe bring my mother over from Mexico. Then I met Emma's father, a charming American with big promises. I got pregnant.
He left.
My work visa situation got complicated. Suddenly, I was undocumented, pregnant, and terrified. But you're documented now. Alexander's mind was already running through immigration law, though it wasn't his specialty.
Yes.
It took 2 years, a lawyer I could barely afford, and more fear than I can describe. But Emma was born here, she's a citizen. That gave me a path. Sophia lifted her chin. I'm legal now, Mr. Chin. I can work. I can stay. I can build a life for my daughter. I never questioned your status, Alexander said quietly. No, but you questioned why I clean instead of working in an office. Sophia's eyes met his directly. I clean because I'm building something, sir. Every dollar I save goes into 2 things: Emma's future and my degree. In 18 months, I'll be a certified accountant. In 5 years, maybe I'll have my own small practice. In 10 years, I'll send Emma to a good college, and she'll never have to be afraid of storms or worry about whether her mother can afford daycare. The passion in her voice, the fierce determination, it reminded Alexander of himself at 22, hungry and driven, determined to build something that couldn't be taken away. That's why I take this job seriously, Sophia continued. Not because I love polishing silver or scrubbing floors, but because it's a step. Everything is a step. And I will not fail my daughter. Silence fell between them, charged with something Alexander couldn't name. He'd hired Sophia because she came with good references and asked for reasonable pay. He'd never imagined the depths beneath the quiet efficiency, the dreams built on silver polish and night school. I'm sorry, he said finally, for making assumptions. Sophia's eyes widened. Sir, you're not just my maid. He struggled for words. You're someone who deserves better questions than the ones I've been asking. Mr. Chin, I don't understand. His phone buzzed again. His CFO, need your approval on due diligence timeline. Alexander looked at the message, then at Sophia, then at the gleaming apartment that suddenly felt less like a home than a museum to his own isolation. What are you doing this afternoon? He asked. Sir, Emma's at Brightside until 5, correct? What were you planning to do? Cleaning laundry, preparing your dinner. Take the afternoon off. Mr. Chin, I couldn't. Consider it compensation for last night. You were on duty during hours that weren't your responsibility. Alexander was already typing a response to his CFO, already rearranging his mental schedule. Take the afternoon. Pick up Emma early. Take her somewhere fun. That's very kind, but it's not kindness. It's logic. Alexander looked up from his phone. You work hard. You work well. Exhausted employees make mistakes.
Take the time.
Sophia stared at him as if he'd grown a second head. Are you feeling all right, sir? Despite everything, Alexander laughed. Actually laughed. Honestly, I'm not sure. At 2:30, he stood at his window, watching Sophia leave the building below. She walked with purpose, always, but today there was something lighter in her step. He wondered where she'd go, what she'd do with unexpected free hours. He wondered when he'd last given himself a free afternoon, a moment without calculation or conquest.
His phone rang.
His father, calling from Connecticut where he lived with wife number 3 and Alexander's half-siblings, the family that had replaced him. Alexander let it go to voicemail. He always did. But this time, standing in his silent apartment, he listened to the message. Alexander, your stepmother wants to know if you'll come to Lily's memorial service next month. It's been 15 years. We thought you might be ready. Lily, his little sister who'd been afraid of storms, who died at age 7 in a car accident while Alexander was away at college, too busy building his future to come home for a random weekend, who'd asked him, in their last phone call, if he'd teach her to be brave like him. He'd been 18 and stupid and so sure he had time. Alexander sank into his chair, his hands shaking. He'd built an empire to fill the hole that loss had created. He'd constructed walls so high that nothing could hurt him again. But walls that kept out pain also kept out everything else. At 4:47 p.m., his assistant emailed the final Morrison documents for review. $340 million in real estate, the deal of the decade, proof of his worth and power. Alexander opened the file and stared at the numbers without seeing them. Instead, he saw a little girl wrapped in his jacket, learning to be brave. He saw a woman building a future on determination and dreams. He saw his own reflection in the dark window, successful, solitary, safe. And for the first time in 15 years, Alexander Chen wondered if safety was worth the price he'd paid. The next 3 weeks followed a pattern that Alexander couldn't quite explain to himself. The Morrison deal closed successfully, adding another victory to his growing empire. He should have been focused on the next acquisition, the next conquest. Instead, he found himself noticing things he'd never paid attention to before. He noticed that Sophia arrived at 7 a.m. precisely, even on mornings when her night class had run late and there were shadows like bruises under her eyes. He noticed that she never ate the lunch she packed, saving it instead for Emma's dinner. He noticed that she hummed while she worked, soft Spanish songs that filled the penthouse with something warmer than the artificial heat. He noticed Emma too, on the occasional evening when daycare fell through and Sophia had no choice but to bring her. The way she sat so quietly in the corner of the kitchen, coloring with fierce concentration, trying to be invisible. The way her face lit up when her mother smiled at her. The way she'd started saying, "Hi, Mr. Chen," in a shy whisper when she saw him. He told himself this noticing was simply good management, knowing his employees. He told himself it meant nothing. The lie became harder to maintain on a Friday evening in late March. Alexander had returned home at 6 p.m., earlier than usual, to find his apartment silent. Sophia should have been finishing up, preparing to leave. Instead, he found her in the kitchen, sitting on the floor with her back against the cabinet, her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Sophia?" He froze in the doorway, panic flooding through him. He could handle boardrooms and billion-dollar negotiations, but a crying woman? "What's wrong? Is Emma?" "Emma's fine," Sophia said, her voice muffled. She didn't look up, as if she couldn't bear for him to see her like this. "She's at my neighbor's." "I'm sorry, sir. I'll be fine in a moment. Just give me a minute, and I'll—" What happened? Alexander surprised himself by sitting down on the floor beside her, him, in his $3,000 suit, sitting on his kitchen floor. Sophia finally looked up, and the devastation in her eyes hit him like a physical blow. "My landlord is selling the building. We have 60 days to move out. That's normal when buildings sell. The new owner will. The new owner is converting to luxury condos. No more rentals." Sophia wiped at her face with the back of her hand. "I've been looking for 3 weeks. Everything I can afford is either in areas with terrible schools or too far from here. If I can't find something in Emma's school district, she'll have to change schools. She finally has friends, Mr. Chen. She's finally settled." Alexander did quick calculations. "Your rent is $1,800? He'd seen it on the background check when he hired her.
Was.
Everything comparable now is $2,400 minimum. I can't afford that, not with Emma's expenses, not with tuition for my courses." She laughed bitterly. "I could drop out of school. That would free up money. Set me back 2 years, but—"
"No."
The word came out sharper than he intended. Sophia looked at him in surprise. "You've worked for 6 years on that degree. You don't quit now." Alexander stood, pacing the kitchen, his mind racing through options. What if I gave you a raise? Mr. Chin, you already pay me more than. What if I gave you an advance? 6 months' salary to cover the difference while you find something suitable. I couldn't possibly pay that back. Then consider it a loan. Pay it back over time, interest-free. Alexander was already calculating the numbers. He'd just made $40 million on the Morrison deal. What was $15,000 against that? But Sophia was shaking her head. That's incredibly generous, but it doesn't solve the real problem. There aren't affordable apartments in Emma's school district. I've looked at everything. I've called every listing. It's not just about money. There's nothing available. Alexander stopped pacing. In the silence, he could hear his own thoughts forming a solution so radical, so unlike him, that he almost dismissed it. Almost. Move in here. Sophia stared at him. What? This penthouse has 4 bedrooms. I use one. You and Emma could take the guest suite. It has its own bathroom, sitting area. You have privacy. Emma would stay in her school. The words came faster now, gathering momentum. You already keep house for me. This would simply make the arrangement more efficient. Mr. Chin, that's not appropriate. I can't live where I work, and Emma... Why not? Alexander challenged. I'm gone most days until 8 or 9 p.m. You'd have your evenings with Emma. She'd have her own space, stability. You could save the money you'd spend on rent, finish your degree faster. People would think. Sophia's face flushed. The impropriety of... People think what I tell them to think, Alexander said with more confidence than he felt. This is a practical solution to a practical problem. Sir, I appreciate the offer, but I can't accept charity. It's not charity. Alexander crouched down so they were eye level. Sophia, I've built my entire career on good investments. You're intelligent, hardworking, and determined to succeed. Emma is a good kid who deserves stability. This arrangement benefits both of us. You get housing, I get a live-in housekeeper who can manage the place properly. He was rationalizing and they both knew it. But he could see Sophia wavering, see her weighing her pride against her daughter's well-being. I would pay rent, she said finally. Whatever you think is fair. Half your current rent. $900 a month. That's too low. That's my offer. Alexander stood, extending his hand. Do we have a deal? Sophia looked at his hand, then at his face, searching for something he wasn't sure he could name. Finally, slowly, she placed her hand in his and shook. Deal, she whispered. But Mr. Chin, if this doesn't work out, if you change your mind, I won't. He didn't know how he could be so certain, but he was. 2 weeks later, Sophia and Emma moved into the guest suite with everything they owned, a process that took exactly 1 car trip and broke Alexander's heart in ways he didn't know were possible. 1 carload. An entire life packed into boxes that fit in a sedan. That first evening, Alexander stood in his living room, listening to Sophia and Emma settling into their new space, and wondered what exactly he'd done. He'd crossed a line he'd spent 15 years maintaining. He'd let people into his space, his life, his carefully constructed isolation. At 7:30 p.m., there was a soft knock on his office door. Mr. Chen? Emma peeked around the doorframe. She was wearing pajamas covered in rainbows, her dark hair damp from a bath. Mama says I should thank you for letting us live here. You're welcome, Emma. She stood there, shuffling her feet, clearly having more to say. What is it? Alexander asked, gentler than he'd have thought possible. Are you going to eat dinner? I'll order something later. Mama made extra sopa. She says you work too hard and don't eat enough. Emma's face scrunched up, trying to remember the exact message. She says she made plenty, and it would be nice if you joined us. But you don't have to if you're too busy or if we're bothering you. Alexander looked at his computer screen, at the acquisition proposal he'd been reviewing. Then he looked at this small girl in rainbow pajamas, delivering her mother's careful invitation. When was the last time someone had cooked for him? When was the last time he'd eaten a meal with another person instead of alone at his desk or in expensive restaurants where everyone wanted something from him? What kind of sopa? He heard himself ask. Emma's face lit up. Chicken with lots of vegetables and rice. Mama makes the best sopa in the whole world. 5 minutes later, Alexander Chen sat at his own dining table, the one he never used, across from a woman he'd hired 3 months ago and her 3-year-old daughter, eating homemade chicken soup. It was the best meal he'd had in 15 years. "This is delicious," he said, meaning it. Sophia smiled, that sunrise smile that transformed her face. "My grandmother's recipe. She said good soup could fix almost anything." "Can it fix the scary sky?" Emma asked, swirling her spoon through her bowl. "The sky isn't scary anymore, remember?" Sophia smoothed her daughter's hair. "You've been so brave." "Because Mr. Chen taught me how," Emma said matter-of-factly. With his blanket, Alexander felt that crack in his chest widen a little more. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, and Alexander marveled at how different this felt from his usual solitary dinners. There was warmth here, life, something he'd convinced himself he didn't need. "Mr. Chen," Sophia said hesitantly, "may I ask you something?" "Of course." "That first night, when Emma was so scared you said you had a sister. You used past tense." The soup suddenly tasted like ashes. Alexander set down his spoon. "I'm sorry," Sophia said quickly. "That was too personal." Her name was Lily. The words came out before he could stop them. "She was my half-sister, technically. 12 years younger than me. She died in a car accident when she was 7. I was 18. Emma's eyes went wide. "Your sister died?" "Yes." "Were you very sad?" Such a simple question from a child. Such an impossible question to answer. "Yes," Alexander said. "I was very sad. I still am sometimes." Emma nodded solemnly. "Mama says it's okay to be sad. She says feelings are like weather, they change." "Your mama is very wise." "I know," Emma said, smiling at her mother with pure adoration. Sophia's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Mr. Chen. It was a long time ago." Alexander picked up his spoon again, though he wasn't hungry anymore. "And please, both of you, when we're at home like this, call me Alexander." Sophia's eyes widened. "Sir, I couldn't. You're living in my home now. We're sharing meals. Mr. Chen seems too formal. Then you should call me Sophia. Not when I'm working, but like this." Their eyes met across the table, and something passed between them. An understanding, a shift, the beginning of something neither of them could name yet. "Alexander." Emma tested the word carefully. "That's a big name." "It is," he agreed. "My name's just Emma." "Emma is a perfect name." She beamed at him, then yawned hugely. "Bedtime pequeña," Sophia said, standing to clear the dishes. "Let me help," Alexander offered. "You don't have to." "I know." They worked together in the kitchen, a comfortable rhythm developing. Sophia washed, Alexander dried. It was domestic and simple, and nothing like his usual life. Later, after Emma was tucked in and Sophia had retired to their suite, Alexander stood at his window overlooking the city lights. Below him, Manhattan pulsed with ambition and hunger, everyone chasing something, building something, trying to prove something. He'd proven everything he'd set out to prove. He'd built an empire. He'd shown his father and everyone else who'd underestimated him that he could succeed beyond anyone's expectations. But tonight, standing in an apartment that finally felt less empty, Alexander wondered if he'd been building the wrong things all along. In the guest suite, through the walls, he could hear Sophia reading to Emma, a story about a brave princess who saved herself. And Alexander Chin, who'd spent 15 years afraid of caring, felt something terrifying and wonderful unfold in his chest. Hope. Spring bloomed over Manhattan, and with it came changes to Alexander's carefully ordered life that he never could have anticipated. It started small. Emma's laughter echoing through the penthouse in the mornings. The smell of coffee Sophia made, real coffee, not the expensive single-origin beans he ordered, but the kind she bought from a small Latin market that somehow tasted like home. Fresh flowers on the dining table. Children's books appearing on his coffee table, left there by a 3-year-old who couldn't quite grasp that the living room wasn't a playroom. Alexander didn't move the books. He started coming home earlier. Not every night, but more often than before. He told himself it was because he'd mastered delegation, because his team was strong enough to handle late meetings without him. He didn't examine the truth, that he'd started looking forward to coming home. One evening in mid-April, he arrived at 6:30 to find Emma sitting at the dining table, her face scrunched in concentration, surrounded by papers and crayons. "Hey, Emma," he said, loosening his tie. "What are you working on?" "A picture for you." She held up a drawing of what appeared to be 3 stick figures holding hands. "That's you and Mama and me. We're a family now, right? Because we live together?" Alexander's heart stopped. "Emma, where?" But Sophia appeared from the kitchen, gentle intervention in her eyes. "Emma, sweetheart, remember what we talked about? Mr. Chun is our landlord. He's very kind to let us stay here, but we're not a family. We're friends."
Oh,
Emma's face fell.
right.
Friends. She went back to her drawing, but the joy had gone out of it, and Alexander felt like he'd failed some test he hadn't known he was taking. That night, after Emma was asleep, Alexander found Sophia on the balcony, staring out at the city. "I'm sorry about earlier," she said without looking at him. "I should have explained the boundaries better to Emma. She's at that age where she wants everything to fit into neat categories. Home, family, forever." "She's not wrong that we're friends," Alexander said, surprising himself. "Are we not?" Sophia turned to face him, the city lights reflected in her dark eyes. "I don't know what we are, Alexander." The use of his first name, the honesty in her voice, it emboldened him. "I've been thinking," he said carefully, "about your degree. You're taking online courses because you can't afford the time away from work or Emma. What if there was another way?" "What do you mean?" "You're 2 semesters from finishing. What if you enrolled full-time? You could finish in 4 months instead of 18. "Alexander, that's impossible. The tuition alone. I'll cover it."
No.
Sophia's voice was firm. "Absolutely not. You're already giving me below-market rent. You've given Emma access to incredible childcare. I won't take more charity." "It's not charity. It's an investment." Alexander moved closer, his businessman's mind finding familiar ground. "You finish faster, you get certified, you increase your earning potential. Eventually, you'll pay me back with interest if that makes you feel better. But Sophia, you've been fighting for 6 years. Let someone help carry the load." "Why?" The question was barely a whisper. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because I see myself in your determination," Alexander wanted to say. "Because watching you fight reminds me why I used to fight before winning became hollow. Because Emma looks at me like I'm not a profit margin, and you look at me like I'm human, and I'd forgotten what that felt like." "Because it's the right thing to do," he said instead. Sophia searched his face for a long moment. "If I say yes, and I'm not saying I am, I'd pay you back. Every penny." "Fine. With interest. Unnecessary, but fine. And I'd still work for you. I'd still maintain the apartment, still fulfill my duties." "Sophia." Alexander allowed himself to reach out, to touch her shoulder lightly. "Accept the help. Please." She closed her eyes, and he watched her pride war with practicality, watched the exact moment she chose her daughter's future over her own stubbornness. "Okay," she breathed. "Okay.
Yes.
Thank you." 2 weeks later, Sophia enrolled full-time at a local college. Alexander hired a part-time housekeeper to cover the hours Sophia was in class, ignoring his new employee's confusion about why the previous housekeeper was still living in the apartment. He started noticing other changes, too. He noticed that Emma had stopped flinching at loud noises, stopped looking for places to hide when he came home. She'd started approaching him with her endless 3-year-old questions. Why is the sky blue? Where do elevators go? Can you tie shoes? Mama's trying to teach me, but I can't do it. He noticed that Sophia smiled more, laughed easier. The shadows under her eyes began to fade. She started to look her age, 28, not 40. He noticed that he'd started scheduling fewer work dinners, turning down invitations to galas and benefits that used to fill his calendar. He'd rather be home. On a Wednesday evening in early May, Alexander was reviewing contracts in his office when Emma knocked on his door. "Alexander, can I ask you something?" "Of course, come in." She climbed into the chair across from his desk, her feet dangling well above the floor. "There's a thing at school. For Mother's Day. We're supposed to do activities with our families." "That sounds nice. But Mama has her big accounting test that day. She can't come." Emma's voice got smaller. "Everyone else will have 2 people. Some have 3 or 4. I'll just have me." Alexander set down his pen. "What time is this event?" 10 o'clock on Saturday." He pulled out his phone, looking at his calendar. He had a conference call with investors in Singapore at 10 a.m. It was important. They were finalizing a $200 million deal. "Would you?" Emma's voice was so quiet, he almost didn't hear her. "Would you maybe want to come? You don't have to. I know you're busy and important, and I'm just..." "Emma." Alexander came around the desk, kneeling in front of her chair, so they were eye level. "I would be honored to come to your Mother's Day event." Her face transformed, sunshine breaking through clouds. "Really? Really? But I'm not a mother, so I might not be very good at mother activities." "That's okay." Emma threw her arms around his neck, nearly knocking him over. "You can just be you. That's good enough." That Saturday, Alexander Chen, master of the universe, closer of billion-dollar deals, found himself sitting on a tiny chair in a classroom decorated with handprint flowers, gluing macaroni onto construction paper. "You're doing it wrong," Emma informed him seriously. "The macaronis need to make a pattern." My mistake." Alexander rearranged his macaroni into what he hoped was a pattern. Around them, other families worked on their projects. He was acutely aware of being the only man in a room full of mothers, aware of the curious glances, aware that he and Emma looked nothing alike. But Emma didn't seem to notice or care. She chattered away about her friends, about her favorite books, about how Mama was going to be so surprised by their macaroni masterpiece. "Okay, everyone." The teacher clapped her hands. "Now we're going to share what we love most about our mothers or the special person who brought us today." Children around the room began sharing. "My mom makes the best pancakes. My mommy reads me stories every night. My mama always knows when I'm sad." Then it was Emma's turn. She stood up, serious and small, and Alexander's heart clenched. "My mama works really hard," Emma said. "She goes to school and takes care of me, and sometimes she's really tired, but she never says she's too tired for hugs. And Alexander came today because Mama couldn't, and that means I have 2 people who care about me, which is even better than 1. The simplicity of it, the pure child logic, 2 people caring is better than 1, hit Alexander like a freight train. After the event, as they walked back to his car, Emma slipped her hand into his. It was such a natural gesture, so trusting, and Alexander felt that terrifying crack in his chest split wide open. "Thank you for coming," Emma said. "You made it perfect." "You're welcome." His voice came out rougher than intended. Emma, can I tell you something? Okay. Having you and your mama in my home, it's made my life better. Better than I knew it could be. Emma looked up at him with those impossibly wise eyes. Because we're friends? Yes, Alexander said, though the word felt inadequate. Because we're friends. That evening, after Emma had shown Sophia their macaroni artwork at least 15 times, after she'd been tucked into bed with her favorite stories, Sophia found Alexander on the balcony again. She hasn't stopped talking about today, Sophia said softly. Thank you for going. I know you had important work. There's always important work, Alexander interrupted. There will always be another deal, another acquisition. But Emma's childhood, these moments, they don't come back. Sophia moved to stand beside him at the railing. You're different than you were 2 months ago. Is that bad?
No.
She smiled, that sunrise smile. It's wonderful. It's like watching someone remember how to be human. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights blur into constellations below. I aced my exam, Sophia said finally. The one I took today while you were gluing macaroni. I never doubted you would. 1 more month. For more exams. Then I'll have my degree. Her voice held wonder, as if she still couldn't quite believe it. 6 years, Alexander. 6 years of fighting and hoping and barely holding on, and it's almost over. What comes next? Job applications. Entry-level work, probably, until I get my CPA certification. Then,
She paused.
then Emma and I find our own place. You've been incredibly generous, but we can't live here forever. The words hit Alexander harder than they should have. Why not? Because this was always temporary. Because you deserve your privacy back. Because, what if I don't want my privacy back? The words came out before he could stop them. What if I like having you here? Both of you. Sophia turned to look at him fully, and in her eyes, he saw his own confusion reflected back. Alexander, what are we doing here? I don't know, he admitted. I just know that 2 months ago, I came home to an empty apartment and convinced myself that was what success looked like. Now I come home to Emma's laughter and your smile and dinners that taste like someone cares whether I eat. And I don't want to go back to empty. I'm your employee, Sophia whispered. This is complicated. It is, Alexander agreed. But I'm willing to navigate complicated if you are. What exactly are you saying? He turned to face her fully, his heart pounding in a way that billion-dollar deals never made it pound. I'm saying that somewhere between a thunderstorm and macaroni art, you and Emma became the most important part of my life. I'm saying I want to figure out what that means. I'm saying... Sophia kissed him. It was soft and brief and perfect, and when she pulled back, her eyes were bright with tears. I'm saying the same thing, she whispered. And it terrifies me. Me too. Alexander reached up to cup her face gently. But I'm willing to be brave. A very wise 3-year-old taught me how. Sophia laughed through her tears, and Alexander kissed her again, properly this time, and felt 15 years of walls finally crumble into dust. Inside, if they'd been paying attention, they would have seen Emma peeking through her bedroom door, a huge smile on her small face. Her picture had been right after all. They were family. The last exam took place on a Wednesday in early June. Alexander had rearranged his entire schedule to be there when Sophia came home, Emma bouncing beside him with a hand-painted "Congratulations, Mama" sign that had taken 3 tries and considerable help from a billionaire who discovered he was terrible at arts and crafts. When Sophia walked through the door at 3:47 p.m., her face said everything. I did it, she whispered. Alexander, I actually did it. Emma launched herself at her mother, Alexander following more slowly, and the 3 of them stood in the foyer in a tangle of celebration and tears and laughter. I'm so proud of you, Alexander said, meaning it with every fiber of his being. We have to celebrate, Emma declared. Ice cream and pizza. And all of that, Alexander agreed. But first, I have something for your mama. He retrieved an envelope from his office, his hands surprisingly steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to offer. What's this? Sophia asked, taking the envelope with confusion. Open it. Inside was a job offer letter. Not just any job offer. A position as junior financial analyst at Chin Capital, with a salary that made Sophia's hands shake. Alexander, I can't. This is too much. It's market rate for your qualifications, he said firmly. I checked with 3 other firms. If anything, I'm underpaying you because you don't have experience yet. But Sophia, you're brilliant with numbers. I've seen your coursework when Emma shows me. You understand financial systems intuitively. I want you on my team. But people will say I only got the job because we're... She gestured between them, unable to name what they were becoming. Let them say it. Then you'll prove them wrong by being the best analyst I have. Alexander took her hands. I'm not offering you this because we're together. I'm offering it because you've earned it. Because you're going to be extraordinary at it. Because Chun Capital will be better with you in it. Sophia looked at the letter, then at Emma, then at Alexander. What about the housekeeping position? I'll hire someone else. You'll be busy with your actual career. He paused. Though I hope you'll still live here. Both of you. Not as my employee. As my family. The word hung in the air, enormous and terrifying and right. Are you asking? I'm asking if you'll stay. I'm asking if we can see where this goes. I'm asking if you'll let me be part of Emma's life, your life, officially and permanently. Alexander felt his voice crack. I'm asking if you'll help me remember what it means to be human instead of just successful. Sophia was crying again, but she was smiling too.
Yes.
Yes to all of it. Emma, who'd been watching this exchange with the intense focus of a child who knows something important is happening, tugged on Alexander's sleeve. Does this mean you're going to be my dad? The question stopped everything. Alexander looked at this child who'd asked for his blanket during a storm, who'd called him sad when he needed to hear it, who'd taught him about being brave. Would you like that? He asked carefully. Emma nodded so hard her curls bounced. Asked for a dad for my birthday. I thought you had to grow them like gardens, but Mama said it doesn't work that way. But maybe it does work that way, just slower. Because you weren't my dad before, but you could be my dad now. Right? Alexander knelt down to her level, this little girl who'd changed everything. Emma, I would be honored to be your dad. But I've never been a dad before. I might make mistakes. That's okay. I've never had a dad before, so I might make mistakes too. Emma's logic was flawless. We can learn together. He pulled her into a hug, feeling Sophia's hand on his shoulder, feeling the pieces of his broken heart finally knitting back together. That night, after celebration pizza and ice cream, after Emma had been tucked into bed with extra stories and extra kisses, Alexander and Sophia sat together on the balcony, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. I never thought I'd be here, Sophia said softly. When I came to this country with nothing but dreams, when Emma's father left, when I was cleaning houses and studying late into the night. I never imagined this.
What?
A billionaire's penthouse. Alexander smiled.
No.
Happiness. Sophia turned to look at him. Real happiness. The kind that doesn't come from accomplishments or degrees or proving people wrong. The kind that comes from being loved and loving back. I do love you, Alexander said, the words feeling both foreign and natural. Both of you. I didn't think I could any more after Lily. I thought I'd locked that part of myself away forever. What changed? A little girl asked me to hide her in my blanket, Alexander said simply. And I couldn't say no. Inside, in her bedroom, Emma slept peacefully beneath a blanket that wasn't really a blanket at all. It was Alexander's suit jacket from that first night, the one he'd wrapped around her during the storm. Sophia had tried many times to return it, to replace it with a proper blanket, but Emma insisted it was special. It's my brave blanket, she'd explained. It helped me learn that scary things don't last forever. 3 months later, on a Saturday in September, Alexander Chen stood in a small courtroom with Sophia beside him and Emma bouncing nervously in her best dress. The adoption proceedings were remarkably quick, the judge smiling down at them with the warmth of someone who'd seen love in all its forms. Do you, Alexander Chen, promise to care for, protect, and love Emma Sophia Martinez as your own daughter for all the days of your life? I do, Alexander said, his voice steady despite the tears streaming down his face. And Emma, do you accept Alexander Chen as your father? Emma nodded vigorously. Yes. He's already my dad in my heart. Now he gets to be my dad on paper too. The courtroom erupted in gentle laughter, and the judge signed the papers that made official what had been true for months. They were a family. That evening, Alexander's father called. The first time they'd spoken in 3 years. I heard about the adoption, his father said, his voice uncertain. Your stepmother saw the announcement. Yes, Alexander said simply. I also heard you're engaged. To your former housekeeper. Her name is Sophia. She's a financial analyst in my company. And yes, we're getting married in December. A long pause. Then, Lily would have liked that. She always wanted you to be happy. The mention of his sister's name, after so many years of silence, nearly broke Alexander. Dad, about Lily's memorial service. I know you couldn't come. You were building your career, I understood.
No.
Alexander cut him off. I was hiding. I was so afraid of feeling that pain again that I locked everything out. But I'm not hiding anymore. If you do another service, I'd like to be there. I'd like Sophia and Emma to meet the family. I'd like to try again. His father's voice was thick with emotion. I'd like that too, son. After they hung up, Alexander found Sophia and Emma in the living room, attempting to build a blanket fort that was more collapse than architecture. Need help? He asked. Yes. Emma grabbed his hand. You're tall. You can reach the high parts. As they built their ridiculous fort together, draping blankets over furniture and securing corners with heavy books, Alexander marveled at the journey that had brought him here. A year ago, he'd been alone in his tower of success, convinced that isolation was the price of achievement. Now he was building a blanket fort with his daughter while his fiancée supervised, laughing when the whole structure collapsed and they had to start over. Alexander, Emma said, once they'd finally created something stable. Can I ask you something? Always. When I was little and scared of the storm, why did you help me?
You didn't know me.
You could have just been mad like you were at first. Alexander considered the question, this child who asked the hardest, most important things. Because, he said slowly, when I saw you so afraid, hiding behind that curtain, I remembered what it felt like to be scared and alone. I remembered my sister, who used to be afraid of storms too. And I realized that maybe the bravest thing I could do was let myself care again, even though caring can hurt. But caring can be happy too, Emma said wisely. Like now. Like now, Alexander agreed, pulling both Emma and Sophia into a hug. That night, after Emma was asleep in her room, not a guest room anymore, but her room, with her name on the door and her drawings covering the walls, Alexander stood at his window, looking out over the city. Sophia came to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his. Any regrets? She asked softly. Not a single one. He turned to face her. You and Emma saved me, you know. I was so busy building an empire that I'd forgotten what I was building it for. And now I know. I'm building a life. A real one, with people I love and who love me back. With laughter and blanket forts and macaroni art. With storms that pass and brave little girls who teach me it's okay to be scared sometimes. With a woman who used to clean your floors and now helps run your company, Sophia added with a smile. With the woman I'm going to marry, Alexander corrected. With the mother of my daughter. With my best friend. They kissed as the city sparkled below them, full of other people chasing their own dreams, building their own empires, searching for their own versions of success. But Alexander Chen had learned what many never do, that the greatest success isn't measured in dollars or deals or buildings with your name on them. It's measured in the small hand that reaches for yours in the dark, trusting you to keep the monsters away. It's measured in the woman who sees past your walls to the person you could become. It's measured in the courage to wrap a frightened child in your jacket and teach her, and yourself, how to be brave. Years later, when Emma was grown and asked her father about the turning point in his life, about when he went from the ruthless businessman the media portrayed to the man who revolutionized corporate parenting policies and gave millions to children's causes, Alexander would always tell the same story. He'd tell her about a thunderstorm, a little girl hiding behind a curtain, and 5 words that changed everything. Please hide me in your blanket, because sometimes the greatest transformations begin with the smallest requests. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let yourself care. And sometimes the blanket that saves a frightened child is the same one that saves the man who offers it.
The end.